Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen. And this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glares. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me be the first to welcome you to the really big Cowboy Logic episode, Cowboy Logic Radio. And I'm Don Neuen, ladies and gentlemen. Oh boy, tonight's show is already proving to be riveting. Back to you, Donna.
You sound a little nasally.
I got a head cold, and it's kind of a head cold, chest cold.
Sinus thing kicking in with
Maybe I should practice my intro.
Yeah, I think you should.
I'm Don Neuen, ladies and gentlemen. How's that sound? It doesn't have the cojones that it usually does.
No, it doesn't, but that's
Maybe
okay.
I should talk like this.
If we didn't say anything, probably nobody would have noticed.
Who do I sound like, Donna?
John B. Wells.
John B. Wells, that's right.
Forget it. You'll never sound that way. That is a one
Even with
in
a head cold and a chest
voice.
cold, I can't sound like John B. Wells.
John B. Wells has a one
He's
in
like a bipedal
voice.
chest cold in front of a mic. Don't you think? Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I need to bring something up that's very serious and important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a little over 4 years ago, almost 5 years, Donna, we started talking on a frequent basis, both among ourselves and with featured guests, such as Dr. Peter Vincent Pry and Claire Lopez and Denise Simon and
Frank
Lieutenant
Gaffney.
Colonel Bill Cowan and Major General Paul Vallely. We started talking about the fact that North Korea indeed is a threat to the United States because of the capabilities of being able to detonate a nuclear EMP blast high above the United States.
EMP standing for electromagnetic
If we have to
pulse.
explain that at this point to the listeners, they are brand new.
Exactly, and people need to wake up to this fact.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this past weekend, the Wall Street Journal has finally caught up with Cowboy Logic Radio and many of our friends and colleagues that we run around with in this little circle we call Talk America Radio.
Mm-hmm. And it's about time, because the threat is real. These North Koreans, this blast, and you notice they do it on all the holidays. They did it on July 4th, now they're doing it on Labor Day. North Korea blasts a hydrogen bomb. Just to put this into perspective, you've seen the bomb that hit Hiroshima, that big mushroom cloud? This is 5 to 10 times bigger than the hydrogen bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. Okay, it was underground. It caused a magnitude 6.0 quake that was felt in China and Russia. The UN called an emergency session in New York where Nikki Haley, and I'm not a real fan of hers, she started with
but
the
you know what?
Confederate
She's
stuff.
doing a pretty good
She's doing a
job.
darn good job as UN Secretary for the United States. So, what happens now? Because, as all of the aforementioned guests on Cowboy Logic Radio have said, North Korea has already got this capability, and they're in bed with Iran, which has $150 billion US dollars. Thank you, Barack Hussein Obama.
Well, they're actually Iranian dollars.
It
that
doesn't
we
matter.
seized.
They shouldn't have had that money.
Well, we got to be accurate.
Given back to them.
We got to be accurate.
But the point being is, they're in cahoots with North Korea, and they're just as insane, if not more insane, against wanting to just obliterate Israel and us, the great Satan.
Can you imagine if we would have taken, I flew this up to Facebook this past weekend. Can you imagine if we would have taken the $150 billion that we released and gave back to Iran? Can you imagine if we'd have sent that to Texas?
Well, they're already hemming and hawing about 8 million. Look at this. We're sending 8 billion to Texas.
Can you imagine if we would have used the money that we did seize from Iran?
Could you imagine if we had used it anywhere here in the United States? Exactly.
But we can't do that. Do you know why we can't? Because John Scary and Barry, what is his name in the film? Barack.
Yeah, something like that.
Obama.
We'll get to that later, actually, when we talk with Joel Gilbert. When we talk with him, actually, at the top of the hour, folks, we're going to have him on for 2 segments. Joel Gilbert is a filmmaker, and he did a film called Dreams from My Real Father, in which he looks at Frank Marshall Davis as the real biological father of Barack Obama. And let me tell you something, folks, it's pretty compelling, and it shows you the deep communist, not Marxist, just the communist roots and radical Islamic roots that really have given rise to the Democrat Party right now, as Barack Obama is still leader of that party, and they are moving farther and farther to the left. It's scary.
You know, I was watching something this weekend, and I don't know if it took place today or not, but there was an article, Donna, I actually don't know whether I saw it or read it, to be honest with you, but that Barack Obama is going to comment on President Trump's canceling of DACA.
Oh, okay.
Now, I find that to be inappropriate. Whether you agree with what Trump is doing or not, I find it highly inappropriate for a past president to be doing many of the things that Barack Obama is doing.
He's running
can you imagine if
government.
Bush would have been acting and behaving post-president like Barack Obama is now?
It's always been tradition for whoever's the president to basically get the hell out of Dodge. Barack Obama is doing the exact opposite. He has a multi-million-dollar house in D.C. He has another multi-million-dollar house in Chicago, another one in Hawaii, which I believe is the Hawaii, or the, Magnum P.I. home, which I think he bought.
That ever came to fruition.
It's close to it.
But the point, he's a successful author.
Hold on,
now.
I'm not done yet. And he's buying a $15 million lot in Martha's Vineyard, in which I guess he's going to put up another multi-million-dollar house. How do you get that, folks, when you have done nothing but lived off the public dole, and the most you've ever made as president of the United States is about $400,000 a year? How does that work?
You write books about a Kenyan goat herder.
That's bullcrap. I'm sorry. It's not a Kenyan goat, and we will dispel that myth.
His grandfather was.
We'll dispel that myth
he claims
at the top
his
of the
grandpa.
hour with Joel
He claims
Gilbert.
Papaw was a Kenyan goat herder.
I never knew what a papaw was till I moved to Georgia.
They're all over the place down here.
They were
our friend
pop-pops
Jason
where I'm
Moore.
from.
He's a papaw.
He's a papaw. A
Keith
few
Runnels,
times.
our friend Keith Runnels, is a papaw.
He's a papaw, and if Paige keeps it up, pretty soon Kelly will be a papaw.
Well,
it won't take much
at
longer.
some point, Kelly Runnels is going to be a mega papaw. Because lots of kids in that family. Hey, we're just doing some quick shout-outs to some locals here.
Yeah, but you know what? His daughter, Rachel, has grown to be just a fine young woman, and she is going over, I believe, to Africa for about 2 weeks to do some religious work and to work with underprivileged people over there. God bless her. She's a
You know why
really
Kelly's not
great
going
woman.
over there?
Why?
He can't stand to look at bare feet.
He can't. That's true.
And over there's a lot of bare feet where Rachel's going, so Kelly decided he was going to stay at home.
So let's go back to DACA.
Big shout out to all the Runnels, by gosh.
That's true.
Go Tennessee Vols. Back to you, Donna.
I'm sure they don't want to hear that as they're Florida people. Okay,
well,
DACA.
and Georgia.
And Georgia.
They don't like Alabama.
Oh, yeah, that's a no-no. The Crimson Tide, no way. All right,
well,
DACA.
I've got a good liberal friend that's, his name is Lamar Sanford, and he owns DNS Classic Coach. And he and his lovely wife, Karen, could not be further politically away from me, Don Neuen. And so we have, not only do we have conversations about the bus industry, they end up being political.
And
here's the other thing. Lamar Sanford is a huge Alabama fan.
So he hates you because you went to Tennessee.
That's right. Yeah, one more reason
Let
not to
alone
like
that you're
Don
on
Neuen.
the right, but he calls you when he needs buses, I'm sure.
Yeah, we call to have a good old time.
All right, so DACA, which, by the way, the aforementioned Barack Hussein Obama admitted was illegal. Can someone please tell me how the President of the United States can actually
He can
institute
do
a
something,
program
then say it's illegal,
he admits is illegal
and get away with it?
Anyhow, should President Trump protect the Dreamers or put them into the immigration rules for everyone else? I think the latter. Anyhow, they've been here 20 to 30 years. Why haven't they become citizens yet? Okay?
Because our immigration system is terribly broken, Donna Fiducia.
If you just enforce the laws on the books, which allegedly is what Trump is going to do, he's going to end DACA, but he is going to allow it to kick in 6 months to give Congress time to get their act together, which is no time we've learned whatsoever because they're totally freaking useless. I know. It is pretty damn funny. I'm sorry.
Congress get its act together.
Okay. Any criminals in DACA should immediately be deported, supposedly, allegedly. That is still being done.
Oh, my gosh.
DACA gives protections and work documents for kids brought here illegally below 16 years old. Many of them are now in their 20s and 30s. My question... Will you stop? Yes, that's
Congress,
you, Mitch.
get there.
He's gonna. Hey, Trump is letting Congress hang themselves.
I laughed so long I forgot what I was laughing about.
You're laughing at the fact that DACA is ended, but Trump is giving Congress 6 months to put something else in.
To get their act together.
Yeah, I know.
Hey,
So,
ladies and gentlemen, that was fake news.
the problem is
Fake news laugh, Donna.
DACA or whatever is inconsistent with the rule of law. It's against Trump's campaign promise. It started in 2012 again under Barack Obama, and again, Obama admitted it's been illegal. And the Texas Attorney General says he's going to sue the federal government if it's not stopped. So there. So
Well,
it
that won't
supposedly
be the
will
first
end in
time
6
that
months.
happens
No.
now. Someone sues the federal government.
So
now, here's the
Congress
problem
has
with
6 months
here's the
to fix
problem,
it.
ladies and gentlemen, with suing the federal government. They have an endless supply of attorneys, and they've got all of your money to pay those attorneys to defend themselves.
I thought that was Robert Mueller in this fake Russian case. That too.
Although you haven't heard too much about the Russian
No,
thing.
it's amazing how the narrative changes. So now it's anybody if you talk to somebody on the left and you try to argue with them with fact, and eventually it escalates because they don't want to argue with fact, they argue with emotion, and it will degrade into you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're an anti-whatever, Islamist or whatever. Okay, that's what it will degrade to. On a larger national scale, that's exactly what's happening. The Russia thing didn't work.
Nope.
Now they're saying, I forget all the narratives. Well, first they said it was illegal voting. So Jill
Right.
Stein started to count the votes and found out that there were actually millions of illegal votes.
The recounting was not in her favor.
So that stopped really fast. Remember in Detroit?
Yeah.
And I believe it was San Diego County, 138% of
was this
people
in
voted.
Detroit or San Diego?
Both. Detroit and San Diego. But in San Diego itself.
Hold on, you said, and remember in Detroit, I think it was San Diego County.
Detroit, it was all over 100%. But in San Diego, California, San Diego County, it was 138% voted. And it's funny how they all vote Democrat.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
I would like to suggest formally that we put Maxine Waters on a plane with an agenda. The plane is heading to North Korea. Maxine Waters is directed to impeach Kim Jong-un.
That won't happen. She likes him.
Yeah, but it's her job to impeach him.
Not
We put
really.
her on a plane.
She's a communist. She
We put
loves
her
him.
on a plane and send her to North Korea with the task of impeaching Kim Jong-un. What do you think about that, Donna?
Well, if you read Trevor Loudon's book, The Enemies Within, she's one of the biggest communists
She
in the
is.
government. So that's
so they
not
could
going to happen.
speak the language.
Exactly. So let's go on with this DACA thing. It stands for Defend Action for Children's something or other. I forget. I
What does it stand for,
arrivals.
Donna?
I can't read my own writing. Defend Action for Childhood Arrivals. 800,000 people are dreamers. But again, they're a fraction of the estimated 11 million illegals that are in the United States, most of which are Hispanic. So, of course, Al Franken, no surprise there, wants DACA to continue so illegals can keep voting him in. But, I mean, this is just insanity. if you have to enforce the laws on the books. We don't need more laws. We need to enforce the laws on the books. Which brings me to Antifa.
Oh, it's that. Ladies and gentlemen, the Antifa moment brought to you by Milano's Pizza, just north of LaGrange, Georgia.
No, don't even put those two in the same sentence.
Well, we're not, but we're, we like Milano's Pizza.
This segment of the show.
Yeah, this segment just happens to be the Antifa moment.
It happens to be brought to us by Milano's Pizza.
I like having a headache, a head cold. It makes me sound
like John
international.
Wells. Yes.
And radio-esque.
No, you know what you say? I don't always. You're like the Dos Equis guy.
Yes, but I don't drink.
That's true.
I don't ever drink, but if I did, I'd be repulsive.
You'd be really crazy because you sound like you're a little tipsy tonight.
I don't ever consume alcohol, but if I did, I'd be out of control.
And I can speak from experience. Milano's Pizza, by the way, has a very nice wine menu.
But I don't drink. But I do eat pizza.
Yes.
And I eat lasagna. And I eat other Italian cuisine dishes, like ravioli.
Yes, at Milano's Pizza.
Why am I talking like this?
In LaGrange, Georgia. Can I continue with this?
Please do. Are you going to talk about DACA? What are you talking about
we're
now?
moving on to Antifa now.
Antifa.
So remember when Donald Trump said both sides are violent? No, everybody jumped down his throat. Oh, how could he say that? He's admitting that there's KKK people and they're all violent and there's Nazis on the right and all the deplorables are Nazis. How could he say that? Well, if you really actually listen to his speech, he's right. And half the time, what he says after everybody's all up in arms with him, well, he's right. After the Bay Area violence, California is debating classifying Antifa as a street gang. So maybe Trump again was right. Violence happens on both sides. They're going to classify him
as a street gang?
Yeah. They dress all in black with hoods, hitting anyone with opposing views. They bring baseball bats to these things.
ISIS.
Yeah. And you know what? If they were dressed in white, how would that be any different than the KKK? Difference is, I don't see anybody dressed in white robes at any of these things. California is considering white nationalists. They have to throw this all in, though, because they can't just use Antifa. So they're considering white nationalists, neo-Nazis, and Antifa as terrorists under state law.
Until Charlottesville
have to be equal
happened,
opportunity offenders.
Until Charlottesville happened, when was that? August 12th?
Yeah, it was a few weeks ago.
I'd never even heard the term white nationalist.
Well, that's the thing. The guy who apparently put this whole thing together is a Occupy Wall Streeter and an Obama supporter. So that's going to come out, folks. Bear that in mind. In fact, a lot of the people at the Charlottesville protest, quote unquote protest, on both sides got out of the same bus. George Soros is paying agitators on both sides to actually play roles for both sides. And they're trying to make, now, obviously, this jerk who ran into the crowd and killed an innocent woman, who knows what was going on, what side he was on, although they say he was on the neo-Nazi, quote-unquote, side. Point being is, though, that is a horrible thing that happened. But the press totally ignores, I'd say 10 to 1, other things that happen from the other side, starting with Congressman Scalise and that shooter that actually went there and said, where are the Republicans? And had there not been Capitol Police on that baseball field, he would have slaughtered all the Republicans on the baseball field because they were unarmed. And the only reason why there was Capitol Police there is because I believe it was Scalise is allowed to have armed bodyguards because he's, the head of one of the commissions.
Here, let me put this into perspective. Conservative individuals such as you and me will look at what went on in Charlottesville and has been going on with some of these protests, and we will be very vocal about the fact that anybody that displays this kind of violence, whether they consider themselves to be far right or far left, all of those people are hideous individuals and should be punished to the fullest extent by the law. Mm-hmm. Don't you agree with that?
I do.
Now, the left and the left-wing media will not see it that way. They only will attack anything that they can attach to the conservative movement. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it has been.
Yep.
That it goes back to when Hillary Clinton goes, it was a right-wing conspiracy.
Fast right-wing conspiracy.
And you freaked out and went, oh, my God.
And they all went with it. You knew that was going to happen. Well, let's look at workplace violence. You know, the Fort Hood massacre. That was workplace violence. What about the guy in Oklahoma who stopped one of his workers from being beheaded after another woman was already beheaded and killed by a guy yelling Allah Akbar at a Christmas party? I'm so sick of the double standard. And you talk about Charlottesville. God bless Judicial Watch. They have a Freedom of Information request against the FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, the Clintons, and McCabe's wife and her failed electoral bid, which has to do with Terry McAuliffe, a close friend and political supporter of Bill and Hillary Clinton, who just happened to be the governor of Virginia.
Well, I think
set back when all this stuff in Charlottesville was going, they were told to stand down. Gee, does that sound like Benghazi to you? Sure
I think that if you look at the governor of Virginia, and the mayor of Charlottesville, and you look at the far left political agenda, that's where you're going to come to everything is going to start adding up with regard to Charlottesville.
And it goes back to the Clinton Foundation. You've got Terry McAuliffe there who might want to run for president. It fits. And then the thing is, you've got really good police departments, because right after Charlottesville, they had a huge protest in Boston. Boston, obviously, no friend of the right, but they know how to run their police department. And they did not let both sides get together. They can protest all they want, but in Charlottesville, the police were told to stand down. And I really feel in my gut that Terry McAuliffe wanted something to happen. They were asking for it, and they did everything they could not to try to stop it, because the police were told to stand down, and guess what happens? A tragedy. And it is horrible. And you know what really gets me? We've got 2 minutes left in our news portion of the show. Have we even mentioned Houston? Coastal elites making it political. They're worrying about Melania's shoes. Let them put their money where their mouth is. I have friends that say, oh, Donald Trump sent $1 million in. Well, he can write it off. Well, then where's your money? Where's your money, Barack Obama? Where's your money, Hillary Clinton? And you know what? A year ago, when Baton Rouge was underwater, worse than Katrina, Obama and Clinton never went there. Bill Clinton didn't go there. Hillary Clinton didn't go there. Barack Obama didn't go there. But you know who went there? Donald Trump. Candidate Donald Trump. And I firmly believe that was a turning point in this election.
On a very personal note, for our friends that are suffering down in the Houston, Texas area, we have one of our own that's down there, Chris X, and he has experienced some catastrophic damage to his home.
Lost everything.
We got to see video of that last week, toward the end of the week. Chris, man, our prayers go out to you, and we hope that you're able to recover quickly from all of this.
He said he's okay. I said, anything you need? He goes, right now I'm okay, but he's living in a hotel, and he has no idea when he's going to get back on his feet. It's horrible. Right. And we're worrying about Melania's shoes. Well, I'm not, but the media is worrying about Melania's shoes.
All right. Well, I think Melania has nice shoes.
And a lot of nice everything else, too.
All right. Listen, I got an idea, Donna. We're about to go to break, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming back for a second segment of Donna and I. What do you say we bring Denise Simon in on this? Well, I'll try to get her on the phone.
On your sit rep with Denise this past week, she went on a rant about what Donald Trump needs to do and why is he taking so long, of which I agree. You know, I call a spade a spade. I don't care whether it's left or the right. If you are going to not be doing your job, and I believe Trump's doing a good job in light of what's going on, but he can do more, and he needs to do it faster. And Denise has a whole list. So, yeah, that's a good idea, honey. Let's bring her on.
All right, I'll try to bring her in. Who do we have coming up at the top of the hour again, Donna Fiducia?
We're going to be talking to one Joel Gilbert, who has, among other things, a movie called Dreams from My Real Father. And that really outlines how Frank Marshall Davis is the real father of Barack Obama, among other movies that he's done. He's a great Beatles and Elvis fan, too, and Bob Dylan fan. That's all coming up at the top of the hour, but stay tuned for Denise Simon, and we're going to keep Trump on track.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire, exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, Cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hello, Americans. I'm Kenny Kakady, a 14-year-old musician and American patriot, and you are listening to Talk America Radio at talkamericaradio.us.
This is Denise Simon. 18 hours a day, I live in a world as an intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. What I find is reprehensible. What I find is terrifying. What I find is treasonous. 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 The mainstream media has completely failed the American people. 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 Join me for the Denise Simon Experience every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
This is Don Neuen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Hi, this is Michelle Malkin from CRTV.com, and you're listening to Talk America Radio.
Hi, this is Gunnery Sergeant Jesse Jane Duff, United States Marine Corps retired and Senior Fellow with the London Center for Policy Research. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel compelled to tell you that Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, is my favorite conservative talk show radio host on planet Earth. Not Rush Limbaugh, not Sean Hannity, not Mark Levin, not Laura Ingraham, and not Donna Fiducia, but Don Neuen. Catch Don Neuen, the world's greatest, most talented, most well-articulated, most passionate, highly educated, and mind-stimulating talk show host on the entire surface of the earth every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. right here on Talk America Radio.
Hey, everybody, they're back on again.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts when their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glares. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio.
Let me be the first to welcome everybody back, ladies and gentlemen. My name remains Don Neuen, and I would like to personally and exclusively welcome you back to Cowboy Logic Radio. My goodness, this is a riveting show. And I was able to secure one Denise Simon, Donna Fiducia, to join us on this epic segment number 2. Back to you, Donna.
That would be one Denise Simon from Founders Code. That's Founders with an S, founderscode.com.
Also, the co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep with me, Don Neuen. Back to you, Donna.
And a modest me you are.
Well, I happen to be, listen, ladies and gentlemen, you may not realize this. You may not even believe it if you have heard it, but I, Don Neuen, am Denise Simon's favorite conservative talk radio host. Not Mark Levin, not Rush Limbaugh, not Sean Hannity, not even Donna Fiducia, but me, Don Neuen. Back to you, Donna.
That's because you made her say that. You threatened her. Otherwise, you're not going to help her produce her show.
All right, Denise Simon, we are eating.
Wait a minute. I'm not done with the intro yet.
We are eating a valuable time here.
I'm not done with the intro yet.
Okay, back to you.
Her show on TalkAmericaRadio.us is the Denise Simon Experience, heard Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. You can also hear it on all our terrestrial affiliates. And she is now a contributor to Tom Del Beccaro's newly launched website, politicalvanguard.com. You can also hear her on all the time, because she never sleeps, with Matt Bruce overnight. And
Scott
on the drive
James.
time sit rep, huh?
And Scott James.
And Scott James, that's right, because she never sleeps.
Hey, Denise.
Yes.
Welcome to the big show.
Thank you.
Hey, listen, there is one other thing that you failed to bring up, Donna.
What, that we argue all the time about politics?
Well, you do, but you and Denise argue like cats, but it's okay.
We're like sisters,
But
yes.
you mentioned Tom Del Beccaro.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Tom Del Beccaro's favorite conservative talk show
That's
host,
again because
and
you
I
told
have
him
the audio to prove it.
That's because you told him to record it just like you did to Denise.
I didn't tell him
and
to
you
do
also
anything.
did it to Ron Phillips as well.
I didn't
and
tell these
else.
people to do it. I simply provided them with a suggested text.
And they did it. Kaleem Stevens, same thing. How many more? You sent these things to all these guests.
What's your point?
Gordon Chang, I think, even recorded something similar.
It's amazing, Denise, what you can get people to do when you co-host shows with Donna Fiducia and Denise Simon.
This is true. All right, so the thing is, Denise, let's get down to business here.
Yep.
Last week,
Game face.
as I'm cleaning the barn and shoveling horse poop, I don't know if there's a correlation there. You're on the drive time sit rep with Don, and you are rattling off all these things because I like you, even though we disagree on a lot of things that Donald Trump does.
You love her like a sister. What are you talking about?
But she's extremely critical of Donald Trump. I'm a lot less critical. I'm trying to give him a little more leeway. Point being is, though, I agree with Denise. There are so many things he needs to be doing now, and it's almost like he doesn't understand the powers he has as president.
Well, and that is the big discussion because, for a long time, both you and Don kept asking me, how does Obama get away with doing this and that and this and that? And I kept saying, because a president has extraordinary power. Mm-hmm. And he's not using his extraordinary power. He may have been snake bit because he signed the executive order on the travel suspension on the 6 countries, 5 countries, 9 countries, whatever it ended up being, and then he got sued. But he didn't organize the process right, because he really should have suspended what I would say is visa operations first, and then he should have released the Holy Land Foundation trial documents. And that would have set the stage for his executive order not to be challenged in a court of law. I will also mention that all executive orders are subject to judicial review, and interestingly enough, the first set of those that he signed were subject to judicial review.
A lot of judicial review.
When Obama's, I don't remember any of Obama's being challenged, especially in the discussions that we're having on the Deferred Action of Childhood program, the DACA program, because that was an unlawful, and DAPA, the one for the adults, that was an unconstitutional executive order.
But doesn't that go to the Uniparty? That goes to draining the swamp. They are one party, and they gave Obama a pass because they agreed with all this stuff, the rhinos.
Well, yeah, there's certainly that.
There's
but
no pushback. I mean,
Trump is not draining this swamp. He's just not doing it. And I can't figure out why. I would say the Department of Justice is just as infected today as it was under Eric Holder or Loretta Lynch.
Yep. Okay.
So the big question is
give us
why?
your big laundry list here. The
All right,
DOJ,
I'm going to interrupt here, ladies and gentlemen. Stop, Donna.
Okay.
Denise, I want the punch list. I want it now, and I want it rapid fire. 3, 2, 1.
We have an awful lot of military personnel that are sitting in Leavenworth that do not deserve to be sitting in Leavenworth as a result of Afghanistan and Iraq. He needs to issue an immediate pardon on those people, and I would include Clinton Rance and Christian Saucer. And he needs to expel Chelsea Manning from continued military service and salary. We need to release the documents on the investigation in Benghazi and reopen that investigation, because we've only captured and detained one person, Abu Khattab. One person did not claim full and exclusive responsibility for what happened in Benghazi. I would like to see a release of all the documents of the Obama administration where Obama gave executive privilege to his top staff, such that any kinds of testimony or any kinds of documents that had their names on it were not subject to any kind of release. I want to know why John Koskin is still the commissioner of the IRS. Yeah, that's a good one. I want to release all of the collusion documents relating to the stimulus dollars and the TARP funds. I want to mobilize a commission of civilians to study and expose all waste, fraud, and abuse, going line by line, anything in excess of $5 million. I want a release of all the documents that related to the Gulf spill. I want a release of all the documents related to the Haiti earthquake dollars and the recovery operations. And then I'm going to go on and talk about things that need to be declassified. One is the Holy Land Foundation trial, which he should have done before he did his executive order on the travel suspension. All of those documents related to Fast and Furious, again, of which Eric Holder got his executive privilege. All the documents related to the IRS targeting scandal. All the documents related to spying on the journalists and private citizens. All of the documents related to the White House collusion on the Hillary Clinton private server, because remember, Obama used a pseudonym email address. I want all the documents related to Bo Bergdahl and the trade of the Taliban 5 prisoners out of Guantanamo Bay to Qatar. I want to release all the side deal documents relating to the joint plan of action with Iran, including Iranian prisoners in the United States that Obama pardoned and returned to Iran, and include all the funds that were released back to Iran. People don't know that we think that we only released 1 or 2 prisoners in exchange for those that were held in Iran. That's not true. We released about 22 prisoners. I want to release all the documents related to the EPA on the Flint water crisis in the Colorado River. I want to release all the documents on Obama's kill list and why he was judge, jury, and executioner, especially on Anwar al-Awlaki, who was, agreed he was the inspiration for the continued al-Qaeda operations, but he never killed anybody. I want to release all the documents related to the White House on the Muslim Brotherhood, Mohammed Morsi, the Arab Spring, CARE, ISNA, Muslim Student Organization, all the rest of them. I also want all the documents as related to all of the Muslim chaplains or imams that are in charge of the Bureau of Prisons systems on whatever, religious whatevers. Same thing would go to the workplace violence that came through Fort Hood. What was his name? Major Nadal Hassan. I want to release all the documents related to the White House and the Department of Justice operations on things like Operation Choke Point, any IRS documents that went to Main Justice, Solyndra, the new Black Panthers, all of George Soros's organizations, because remember, under the Obama administration, we found out that George Soros was actually getting government grants. I want to release all of the documents that were recovered at the Abbottabad compound, the bin Laden facility that we did the raid on. I want all of the documents related to the visitor's log from Obama's term in the White House and Trump's to date, including Mar-a-Lago. I want all the documents related to normalizing relations with Cuba and the deal that we cut with FARC, as in FARC. I want all of the costs from Health and Human Services related to Obamacare law and the launch of the website. Remember how nasty that one got. I want to release all the documents related to the top and most dangerous external cyber hacks of U.S. government and infrastructure. We have come to find out that the Office of Personnel Management, when they first came out, they lied to us. It said only a couple of million people were involved, and then the number kept growing and growing to the point I think we're up to somewhere around 30 million.
Put it on pause 1 second. Denise Simon, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm trying to write this down.
Donna is feverishly writing. As should you be. Now, I didn't give you the kind of advance warning that I do on the Drive Time Sit Rep. I'm going to give out an email address. And, Denise, while I'm talking about this, you are so passionate about what you're doing, you are banging your hand on your desk every time you bring up a new point. Stop doing that for me. Thank you very much. We love you. Now,
I'm not banging anything.
You're banging something. I'm hearing it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, write this email address down. Liberty54@verizon.net. Liberty54@verizon.net. If you will send an email to that email address, it will go directly to Denise Simon. She will in turn thank you for sending your email and reply with a copy of this list for you to be able to frame and put up in your study. Now, Denise, I am going to wind you back up again and let you keep going. 3, 2, 1.
I want to release all the documents related to the bailouts of Chrysler, General Motors, AIG, and any of the other Wall Street hedge funds and banks. Wouldn't that be fascinating? I want to release all the documents related to Obama opening the new economic school in Moscow and any of those that were related to Little Miss Hillary when it comes to Skolkova and Uranium One. I want to release all the documents to Obamacare bailouts and the secret funding schemes at the Treasury Department. I want to release the classified documents authored by the Benghazi panel hosted by Pickering and Tom Mullen. I want to release all the documents related to the European Union and the International Monetary Fund bailouts, including Greece. Now, let's talk about sanctions here for a second. I want to apply sanctions and declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terror organization, and I would include remove their charity status, their 501c status with the IRS.
Yes.
Place sanctions on Qatar and relocate the U.S. air base there. That'll never happen, but that's a wish. Sanction the government agencies that do not comply with Freedom of Information Act requests within the law and time frame by suspending 0.1% of their monthly funding until they comply. Stop all funding to the Export-Import Bank. Stop all funding and sanctions to and sanction the Palestinian Authority until they prove no more salary payments to terrorist family members. I call it slay pay. I would withdraw all funding to UNRWA, which is the United Nations Rights Watch thing where the Palestinians get exclusive department at the United Nations. I want to apply economic sanctions to all domestic universities that provide sanctuary status and challenge fairness in student access. I want to terminate all visa operations related to the country waiver program, country waivers program. Suspend the H-1B visa program for 1 year until American unemployed have training and first right of refusal to job openings. I want to mobilize a civilian committee to study and rewrite the House and Senate ethics rules. I want to sanction the cities and states that do not comply with state law on voting rights and voting law. Most of all, that comes down to voter ID. I want to release all the financials on the block grant programs, which, by the way, the federal government gives an awful lot of money to cities and states under the block grant program, and some of them don't even need it. So what do? They turn around and sell the block grant to another city or state. Isn't that a fun little thing? I want to reinstall the detention facilities in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia, and other locations that may be required for military trial. I want to hire at least 4 more inspector generals for each government agency and all grant programs with a value over $10 million, officially terminate all DACA operations and provide lawful tools to Border Patrol and ICE. I want to terminate all the counter-violent extremism programs and grants. I want to reinstall the U.S. ICANN authority and reveal broadband collusion with the internet service providers. I want to reinstall the Islamic training materials to the FBI and the law enforcement fusion centers. I want to sign off on the Justice Against the Sponsor of Terrorism Act. I want to terminate all communications on incarcerated. I want to stop commuting incarcerated offenders where there was a weapon included, which was what I think Obama did, almost 2,000 of those. And then we have some other things that are certainly up for public debate, most of which is the proposed budget. I think that these things need to be done in a congressional setting that I would think that even the stations, like if you're going to get TV stations, like you're going to have a joint session of Congress, State of the Union kind of thing, these kinds of things need to be on TV so people watch them. We need to talk about the proposed budget. We need to talk about the ins and outs of the fraud and collusion with Obamacare. We need to defund Planned Parenthood. We need to reveal the government subsidies. We need to reveal what's really going on with sanctuary cities. We need to reveal what's really going on with the visa program. I want an auditor to go over and do an audit on the United Nations spending. We need to talk about the Paris Agreement, the Joint Plan of Action, tax reform, waste, fraud, and abuse, and the entitlement architecture. 3 pages, done. There you go.
Is that
How about that?
That's very impressive, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, if you will send an email to liberty54@verizon.net, liberty54@verizon.net, you will get a copy of Denise's plan to restore, and it's the restoration and accountability list. And I would also suggest that Scott James, Matt Bruce, and any of the other show hosts at Talk America Radio, send Denise an email. Get that list so you two can talk about it.
A lot of this stuff, Denise, can be done relatively easily if Trump would just use his powers, correct?
That's right. Absolutely right.
See, that's the thing. I mean, even there's a commentary that I pulled this week. Why are Trump's Justice Department appointees protecting the IRS? I mean, that was part of your group. Then you've got 3.5 million more registered voters than live adults in the entire United States. And it's amazing what is going on. And obviously, they threw all their eggs into the Clinton basket. And when that didn't happen, well, now the House of Cards is about to come down if he would use his powers.
Look, I mean, we can read the headlines, and we think that we know that there's an issue with a particular topic or a particular political situation. All I can tell you is when you start getting into the meat of an article, you'll automatically start finding other things out that are absolutely chilling. And I would also argue that, there are some good journalists that are doing some investigative work. You have to go find them, but they're out there.
What do you think about Judicial Watch? I think they're doing yeoman's work, really, in many areas.
I think they're doing some pretty good work. But I would say
I would like to suggest that Tom Fitton hire you.
Yeah, really. Hey, you know what? I don't want to cut all that off because we only got about 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, we got 3 minutes. Let's move to North Korea. Let's talk about EMPs. Let's talk about the fact that people like you, people like us, people like Claire Lopez, Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, Major General Vallely, Colonel Bill Cowan, we've all been talking about this for years. And now, this past Saturday, the Wall Street Journal has a full-blown article about it. In your opinion, you got 3 minutes, Denise. How serious is the EMP threat potentially from North Korea or Iran or any other rogue state?
As long as we know that Iran and North Korea are having discussions about EMPs, then I would say it is serious. But I will also say this too: we often diminish the military weaponry and technology that we have that we can use in an offensive posture. And so while it is a scary proposition that we could be very vulnerable to an EMP. In the same breath, I would also start asking the questions, what do we have in an offensive posture that we can neutralize anything in that realm? We actually launched, a lot of people don't know this, but we actually launched an EMP about 50 years ago. So the United States knows precisely what an EMP's capabilities are. When we did that program, it was called Starfish Prime.
Yep. You had an article about it last week.
Yeah, I think it was only yesterday or today, maybe, but yes. And that's really an important thing, such that we know what an EMP threat looks like should it come to the United States or any westernized nation or ally at the hands of North Korea and or Iran. And even maybe Russia.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Denise.
We're not protected.
The grid's not protected the way it should be. You know that. Donna knows it. I know it. Many other people know it. But you've got Iran, you've got Russia, you've got China, you've got North Korea, excuse me, that is protecting their grid against EMP blasts, be it solar or nuclear. We got about 1 minute and we have to go to break. I find this to be a terrifying move by the Wall Street Journal to finally acknowledge that which we've been talking about for almost 5 years on the air.
Wake-up call.
And so then what do? We have to go back to the power companies, and we have to say to the power companies, what are you doing? And that you have X number of time in order to harden these infrastructures.
And this guy McCall is not doing it. I mean, he's been the head of the, it's been his department, this Congressman McCall, for years. And Claire Lopez has said it might cost $2 billion, which is a drop in the bucket. It might.
Well, Dr. Peter Vincent Price said it too. Between $2 billion if you want to do it on a bare bones scale,
right,
or $20 billion if you want to do it to military specs. This is the biggest no-brainer in the history of the world. Donna, we got to go to break. Who's coming up?
Denise, that was just awesome. Again,
Thank you.
Liberty54 at Verizon.net, founderscode.com. You can hear her on the Drive Time Sit Rep with Don, and also her show, The Denise Simon Experience.
With Don Neuen, ladies and gentlemen. Drive Time Sit Rep with Don Neuen, featuring Denise Simon.
Sit Rep meaning situation report, finding what bad situations we are in, and that was just the tip of the iceberg.
If you listen to that show for no other reason, ladies and gentlemen, listen to it to feel sorry for me at what I have to endure 5 to 6 times a week with sit reps from Denise Simon, then I am unbelievably grateful
but then
to
you
be
can't
able to
sleep
have.
that
But I
night.
can't sleep.
It's true.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got Joel Gilbert coming up at the top of the hour. You do not want to miss this. We will be right back.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance. Yes, when cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Yes, back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Yes, back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia along with Don Neuen. And our very special guest is making his debut this evening on Cowboy Logic Radio. And it's a gentleman by the name of Joel Gilbert. Joel is an American filmmaker, a musician, and a fan of musical history, described by as right-wing by The Hollywood Reporter, which is a major plus in my book, Joel. Films by his company Highway 61 Entertainment include Dreams from My Real Father, where he looks at Frank Marshall Davis as the real father of Barack Obama. And let me tell you, folks, you need to watch that movie. It is very compelling. There's No Place Like Utopia is another one of his great movies. And The Constitution Strikes Back, Episode 8, The Cruz Aid, as in C-R-U-Z. That was done in 2016. Musically, a number of films on Bob Dylan. He had a Dylan tribute band called Highway 61 Revisited. And my favorite, Paul McCartney is really dead and Elvis is found alive. You got to love it. Joel Gilbert, welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio.
Okay, thanks for having me. Great to be here tonight.
Let's start right off the bat, Joel, with your claim, and many people do believe this, that Frank Marshall Davis was the real father of Barack Obama. So can you explain right off the bat, who was Frank Marshall Davis?
Well, for a little perspective, of course, Barack Obama burst on the scene. No one ever heard of him. And he had this narrative that he presented to the public to introduce himself, starting at the Democrat convention when he was the speaker for John Kerry. And he said, my father was a foreign student. He grew up in Kenya herding goats. My mother's from Kansas, and presented himself as this multicultural ideal. And that was backed up by his book that he wrote called Dreams from My Father that came out in 1995, where he described this whole multicultural international background. In my film, Dreams from My Real Father, I did quite a bit of research, which I was actually surprised that no one else had. I went to Hawaii twice to look into Obama's background. I went to a couple of libraries where Frank Marshall Davis's materials had been stored, because he was a pretty, well-respected poet, though he wasn't that famous. But he was most famous for being a propagandist for the Communist Party USA in Chicago, and also famous for having a 600-page FBI file because he was under surveillance because of his activity, pro-Soviet activity during the Cold War. Frank Marshall Davis was a Communist Party operative in Chicago with all the hardcore communists, and after World War II in 1948, he was ordered by the Kremlin through their Comintern International to go from Chicago to Hawaii to start a strike, to organize a strike with the ILWU, the Dock Workers Union. At that time, during the Cold War, Soviet Union was looking to expand in Southeast Asia, and they viewed the U.S. naval forces in Hawaii as an obstacle to Soviet expansion. So their idea was to start a strike, a general strike in Hawaii that would drive out the U.S. Government and be able to take over the island and expel U.S. naval forces, therefore opening up Southeast Asia to Russian influence. So Frank Marshall Davis moved to Hawaii on orders from the Kremlin. He immediately went and met with the Dock Workers Union, organized a strike that lasted almost 6 months, and it was finally defeated, was overcome. And Frank Marshall Davis stayed in Hawaii and was a writer and propagandist for the Communist Party. One of the jobs he had in Chicago, which he was successful at, was bringing black people into the Communist Party. In the 1930s, the white communists in Chicago were not making much progress with black people, and they wanted to use them as tools of their socialist and communist causes, so they recruited black people like Frank Marshall Davis, who was also a journalist. So in Hawaii, Davis tried to convert the NAACP into a communist organization, and they threw him out. They actually complained to the national headquarters of the NAACP. They said, quote, Comrade Davis tried to convert us to the Stalinist line. And they actually shut down the NAACP in Hawaii to prevent that. So Davis was a hardcore communist, a Soviet agent, and in my film, I presented a mountain of evidence that, number one, the Kenyan Obama was not the real biological father, that was just a sham marriage to cover up an affair that Obama's mother had with Frank Marshall Davis, and that Davis was the biological father, And more importantly, I showed and have a lot of evidence that Frank Marshall Davis was Obama's ideological mentor, and that Davis radicalized Obama in a anti-white, anti-American, anti-free market worldview. And that's what the film demonstrates. And even since then, I've done a tremendous amount of research that has all backed that up.
We're talking with Joel Gilbert, who has a phenomenal movie out, among other movies, from his Highway 61 Entertainment, called Dreams from My Real Father. Again, he's looking at Frank Marshall Davis as the real father of Barack Obama. Joel, you talk about how it was important to try to recruit blacks, but there was a religious angle that was a barrier, actually, to get blacks to join the Communist Party, because obviously you can't have one without the other. So in order to really get more blacks involved, they tried to take the religious angle out of it. Is that correct?
Well, let's talk a little deja vu. Bill Ayers, of the terrorist emeritus from Weather Underground fame, the Weather Underground terrorists, most of them came out of the underground in the early 80s. They were either let out of jail, they got pardons, as Bill Ayers did. His convictions were not pursued, and they reemerged in the early 80s, and they began organizations like the Midwest Academy, and they took a different direction than they did in the 60s. The Weather Underground was a Marxist terrorist group that wanted to overthrow the U.S. government, replace the Constitution with the Communist Manifesto. They talked openly about putting 50 million Americans into re-education camps like Mao did in China, and even murdering 25 million Americans if they didn't conform to the utopian socialism that they saw. Now, all of them failed. Because it was so evil, nobody followed them. They went to jail. Some of them were killed. They had to go in the underground. When they emerged from this underground in the early 80s back into Chicago, they had learned their lesson, and they taught a new lesson to the new group of young socialists coming up. And they said, look, don't look people in the eye and say, we want to murder you. It didn't work. Look them in the eye and say, we want to help you. We want to give you free things. We want to give you free health care. We want to give you higher wages. And then use people to take power. And once you take power, you'll throw them under the bus and pursue this radical Marxist agenda when it's too late for anybody to know the difference. So they started a stealth kind of socialism. And they were very interested in Chicago in the early 80s in the black church groups. They were highly organized, highly religious black people, were very pro-American, very much part of the fabric of Chicago and of America, with very strong families. They wanted to penetrate these groups because they were so well organized, but they were failing because Marxism was atheist and they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So the theory was they should bring some black people in to trick the black people in Chicago into thinking that they have their interest at heart. So Bill Ayers, who knew Obama in New York when he was a student at Columbia, which is another story, he got his father, Thomas Ayers, who was the head of Con Edison, to get a grant from the Woods Foundation, $25,000, to pay the first yearly salary for Obama. Bill Ayers brought Obama from New York to Chicago with the idea that through this community organizing group, he could help the communists, the white communists, penetrate the black church groups. So that's the same thing that Obama's father did, deja vu. The white communists used him to manipulate black people into following these communist and Marxist causes that were really not in their interests. So Obama was doing the same thing. That's how Obama came to Chicago. And from the get-go, Bill Ayers was promoting Obama as a future potential politician. I think he saw Obama as his biggest weapon of mass destruction that he could bring to the United States if he could ever get him elected to high office. So the religious aspect of the black churches was overcome by the white communists fooling them into thinking that because someone had dark skin or biracial, in Obama's case, that they were really wanted to help them. In fact, you can see from my film, There's No Place Like Utopia. I go around Southside Chicago. I interview a lot of people. Detroit, black people, they all say things got much worse under Obama. everything got worse. We just got poorer. Taxes got higher, more violence in the communities, worse education, drug culture, single families. So Obama did nothing for black people when he was president, and never intended to. The entire Obama candidacy was a fraud. He ran as a mainstream candidate. I'm going to obey the Constitution. Marriage is between man and a woman. The whole thing was, I'm going to cut the deficit in half. I got him in my film saying all that stuff. So Obama never intended to do any of that stuff. It was a stealth socialist agenda and strategy formulated by the Weather Underground remnants who thought they could take over America by tricking people and taking over the Democrat Party. And that's why today the Democrat Party is a radical socialist party.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Joel Gilbert. You can find him and his work at joelgilbert.net, and we'll give you that site throughout the rest of the interview. Joel, I first watched your film, Dreams from My Real Father, back in 2013. Actually, Donna and I watched it together.
Okay.
And at that moment, we both looked at each other and went, this makes total sense. This is not something that we are having to stretch to believe in. It makes sense. You mentioned earlier, just a moment ago, about the using of the black community by the left. And I would submit, and I know you will agree with me on this, you've spoken about it, that there hasn't really ever been a time when the left wasn't using the black community. And
okay, well, yeah.
And that toward the end of Obama's reign, I had the feeling that blacks had outlived their usefulness to the Democrat Party. And for the past 5 years that we've had this radio show, one of the topics that I continue to drive home is to try to convince my friends and those that I don't know that happen to be black Americans that they've been used. Their parents have been used by the Democrat Party and the left. Their grandparents have been used. And at some point they need to come off this left-wing plantation and start understanding that the values of a Frederick Douglass are what many conservative Americans share with black Americans. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, if you watch my film, There's No Place Like Utopia, I interview a number of African-Americans, Southside Chicago, of all ages, women, some teenagers, and you ask them, you say, you start the conversation, I say, how do you feel about Barack Obama? They light up, they smile, we love him. Oh, yeah, we love Barack Obama. It's just so emotional for them. And I say, why do you love him? They said, well, when we were in school, they said, you can be anything you want to be. And we didn't believe it because we thought, well, we're a minority, maybe we can't get everything we want. And when Barack Obama became president, it was true. We could do anything. So there's an emotional aspect of having a black president that means a lot to black people. Unfortunately, that emotion was well understood by the left and by the radicals, that they could use that emotion to get a radical black leftist elected president that doesn't care or have any interest in black people in order to implement a radical left agenda. So you have this emotional level that they feel that they were marketed on this concept. And then I keep talking to them. You'll see in the film, I say, well, has things gotten any better? No. How do you feel about these illegals coming in your community and driving down wages and taking jobs? Well, we hate it. How do you feel about the drug culture? We hate it. We don't want our kids. We don't want legalized marijuana. We don't want any of that stuff. Well, how do you feel about the economy? Well, the taxes got worse. We're getting poorer. I said, so have things gotten better, Obama, or worse? They say, much worse. I said, do you still support Obama? And they start looking around. They say, well, you know what? So it just takes a conversation, and you got to first recognize that emotional level that they were manipulated, really. The left was looking for a black candidate for years, somebody that they could get 100% of the black vote and white liberals and get him over the top, whether it be a Senate or the presidency one day. And they succeeded with Barack Obama, and the black community, I think, is suffering very, very badly because that agenda that Obama implemented, everything from gay marriage to open borders, devastating the economy, Obamacare, it's harmed black people. So it is the left is very skilled. They've been working at this for years, and they've always used minority groups, whether it's blacks or illegals, to try to undermine traditional America by forcing these leftist values down everyone's throat that nobody wants. Let's all use the same bathrooms. Let's make a grown man can walk into the little girl's room at any time because he identifies as a girl that day. That makes a lot of sense. All this nonsense that really people don't want any part of, they've succeeded through manipulating various groups and, of course, with their influence in the media.
Thank you for explaining that so eloquently.
Okay, thanks.
As you have done I've seen three of your films. I've seen Dreams from My Real Father now 3 times, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get enough of it.
No. I agree.
Pick up more.
I agree. I've seen There's No Place Like Utopia. I've seen that once. And ladies and gentlemen, before this segment is over, and also before the second segment that we're going to be with Joel, we're going to let you know how to get to all of these things. That was a phenomenal film as well. Mm-hmm. Different, but phenomenal. And another thing that I like about your films, Joel, is they're not 52 darn minutes long. I like the fact that you give me...
I'll give you a good hour and a half to 2 hours.
You're right.
My Middle East film, the Islamic-Jewish conflict called Farewell Israel, Bush, Iran, and the Revolt of Islam, that's 2.5 hours long. So it keeps you busy, but I think I pack every minute with lots of interesting facts, and if you turn away for 10 seconds, you're going to miss something good.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, you were talking...
Let me ask you one thing about Frank Marshall Davis. And I'm always very careful when I say this man's name because you and I may share a colleague or a friend, and that is Frank Marshall. And I'm very careful because I really, really like Frank Marshall, the film director, as opposed to Frank Marshall Davis, the communist. But let me ask you this. First of all, do you think that Barack Obama realizes or believes that Frank Marshall Davis is his father? That's question number 1. Question number 2, what do you think would happen if the mainstream media, if the fact that Frank Marshall Davis is Barack Obama's father were actually to come out and be widely accepted by the United States? What do you think would happen at that point?
Okay, a couple issues. First of all, it was, if you read Obama's book, Dreams from My Father, he makes it very clear that his paternity is a question mark. For example, he talks about when I was 12 years old, and I'm quoting, my grandfather would take me to Frank's house. And again, Dreams from My Real Father, it's all about Frank Marshall Davis as much as it's about the Kenyan. Also, everyone in the book that is referred to by their real name, Frank Marshall Davis is called Frank, his mother Anne. Anyone that's not a relative is referred to with a pseudonym, with not a real name. So Frank is one of the people that has his real name there. So he says, when I was 12 years old, my grandfather would take me to Frank's house, and it was though there was some unwritten, unspoken contract between the two of them. So he's giving you a hint right here that there's something going on. And then when the Kenyan Obama dies, Obama writes, I didn't have any documentation to prove that the Kenyan Obama was my father. I didn't have anything to show that I could get an inheritance from him. So there's several little hints that Obama gives that there's a problem or a question about who his real father is. Now, it's something when I was doing my film, I was really trying to nail down at what point was he told from the get-go that this is your father, or is it something they hid for a while? Now, since that film came out, I've become friendly with a gentleman named Keith Kakagawa. Now, Keith Kakagawa is referred to in Obama's book as the name Ray. Now, the pseudonym Ray was actually their drug dealer, but he talks about Keith Kakagawa under the name Ray as his best friend in high school and the only other black student. In fact, Keith is actually a quarter black, but he talks about Keith quite a bit. And Keith was friendly with him and the family and Frank and everybody else and the grandfather. They were all very close. And Keith, unfortunately, has been in and out of prison for most of his life. And I've become friendly with Keith Kakagawa over the past couple of years. I visited him at Corcoran State Prison, and we talk on the phone, exchange letters. So he told me the story of when Barack found out that Frank was his biological father. It's a fascinating story. I've shared it before, where Keith Kakagawa was with Obama in the Ala Manoa Mall in Waikiki. They were sophomores, I believe, in high school, and Keith was a year older. But they all of a sudden, Barry calls him, Barry saw a black man walking out of a sporting goods store, and Barry says to Keith, "That's my father from Kenya." And Keith said, "No way, how could he be? What are you talking about?" He said, No, I recognize him from the pictures. And Barry ran over and jumped in front of him as he was walking out the door. He said, "Are you Barack Obama?" And the Kenyan said, "Yes, who are you?" He said, "Well, I'm your son." And he said, "Well, what are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm just stopping over for a couple days on the way back from Hong Kong on the layover." And then Keith tells me that the Kenyan Obama blew him off and left. And Keith explained that immediately Barry started on a tirade where he was screaming at everybody. He'd scream at his mom and say, "The Kenyan is not my father. You lied to me. Frank is my dad. He gives me money. He spends time with me. I look like Frank." And he'd go to Frank and say the same thing. "You all lied to me. I know you're my dad," on and on. So at first they all denied it. And the grandfather told Keith that he doesn't want Barry talking about it anymore, that if he keeps talking about it, he needs to smack him. And Keith said, "I can't hit Barry." He said, "No, you hit him. I don't want him talking about this." And that Keith told me he actually had to hit him one time, and it was just a big mess. And eventually, a couple months later, Barry stopped complaining about it. And if you look at that poem that is in my film that Obama wrote called Pop, there's a poem called Pop that is allegedly written by Obama that he published. And by the way, Keith Kakagawa told me that Barry started calling Frank Pop. So in the poem Pop, it's a whole like heart-to-heart conversation. In the poem, there are things written like, "I look into your eyes and I see myself inside your black framed glasses. I know you're laughing too. Give me a hug and realize," all these things. So it's like a revelation moment where Frank admits to him that he's his real father. So this is the point, based on that inside information that I'm sharing, that I think at first they hid it from him. They put up this cover story, and I think it made sense because they did forge a lot of documents over the years claiming that the Kenyan was the father. So I think they had to protect themselves from Barry finding out. But more important than the biological aspect is that even before that moment, Barry would, according to Keith, would spend 4 or 5 days a week with Frank, and Frank was his ideological father, his political mentor, and turned him on to Angela Davis, Malcolm X, taught him about how white people are treating black people poorly. And Keith told me stories how they would go to in 10th grade, they would go to the senior prom, and the girls wouldn't dance with Barry or Keith. And Barry would say, "Oh, it's because I'm black." And Keith would say, "No, it's because we're in 10th grade and we're dressed for a luau." And then Barry would he'd complain, "I'm on the basketball team, but I don't get to play a lot because I'm black." And Keith would tell him, "No, you're on the team because you're black. You don't start because you can't shoot." So
can't ride a bike either.
Yeah, so Keith would say that Barry became radicalized. He would even complain. One time he said, Barry complained, my grandfather will never understand me because he's white. And Keith said he smacked him. He hit him because he said, "How dare you say that? He comes to your basketball games. He supports you. He loves you. How can you say that?" So I think Barry was radicalized. Every indication from every source, Frank Marshall Davis radicalized Obama into this anti-white worldview. And he became really a wannabe radical. He never experienced any racism in his life. He had a privileged life, but he admired and wanted to be Malcolm X. He wanted to be these, Weather Underground radicals. This is who he admired growing up, and that's why he gets along with that group so well, and that's why they get along with him.
We're talking with filmmaker Joel Gilbert and his one film, especially Dreams from My Real Father. It's fascinating. We'll be back with the second part of this interview in just a moment on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire.
Hey folks, this is AJ Gaynor, host of Blow and Smoke on the Talk America Radio Network. We know the mainstream media has a narrative they're pushing. On my show, Blow and Smoke, we challenge that narrative, sometimes with simple facts, other times with instinctive logic, but always with truthful, honest debate. I believe the perspective I provide my listeners is indeed unique. Tune in to Blow and Smoke with yours truly, AJ Gaynor, on the Talk America Radio Network and at talkamericaradio.us.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia. And WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
Hey everybody, they're back on again!
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glares. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. We're talking with Joel Gilbert, filmmaker. Highway 61 Entertainment is his company. And man, he's got some great stuff. Dreams from My Real Father, where he looks at Frank Marshall Davis as the real father of Barack Obama. And folks, it's pretty darn
intense.
Yes, and very fact-filled. You really can't argue with it. There's no place like
based on what you just said, Joel, prior to going to break, the analogy I'd like to use from the world that I live in about Barack Obama, which is the kind of the world of rock and roll entertainment, rock and roll buses is what I do for a living. And I see a lot of thug wannabes, a lot of hood wannabes in the rap world. And they come out and they try to act like they grew up in some impoverished ghetto, when in fact they actually grew up like in a suburb of Atlanta like Alpharetta or Sandy Springs or Roswell.
Johns Creek.
And they grew up in $150,000, $300,000 homes, but they come off as if they grew up in Perry homes and are trying to be thug, and they're not. And that, based on what you were telling everybody right before we went to break, that's the vision I got, are these faux thug rappers, is what Barack Obama wanted to be in the political world, in the social world.
Yeah, trying to act cool.
Well, let me comment. Radical wannabes are the most dangerous radicals because they never experienced anything that their idols experienced. Now, Frank Marshall Davis, he in his book called Living the Blues, he explains that he experienced some racism in Kansas when he was growing up. There's one or two incidences. Okay, that's bad, but he turned it into this radical life where he became a communist and became a Soviet agent. Now, that's pretty extreme. Now, Obama never experienced any racism whatsoever. He knows that he can never live up to or measure up to his heroes in the radical left, in the Marxist terrorist groups, Bel Airs, any of them. So he's the type of person, a radical wannabe will always feel that they are inadequate, and they'll always try to do more and more and more and more to prove their worth to their mentors that they are one of them. So I think when you saw Obama go to such extremes as president, to use the IRS to investigate and use the tools of state to prevent free speech, prevent the conservatives from organizing, Fast and Furious, on and on, all these abuses of power were things that I'm sure that earned him high marks in the world of the radical left. As far as what would happen if it was publicly came out, DNA test, something that Obama is not who he says he was, the son of a Kenyan goat herder, and that in fact he was the son of a Communist Party American radical. I think the people that like him would not care. I think if the truth came out, let's say if it wasn't admitted by Obama, but it came out some other way, Obama would probably say, "Oh my gosh, you could have knocked me over with a feather when I heard that." And I guess I'm just like a street kid, like those other street kids.
I heard it on the news.
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah,
Another thing you heard on the news.
I grew up as a street kid, and a lot of street kids don't know who their father is. And gosh, wow. So I don't know that it would make that much difference. I think historically, I guess it's nice to be vindicated, and it's come a long way. The public and the media have come a long way. When I came out with my film in 2012, people would say, "Well, this can't be true, otherwise CNN would have covered this," or "This can't be true, otherwise Fox News would have had it." And Obama wouldn't lie about his background. This is just too far-fetched. And 3 or 4 years later, it was like, oh, of course CNN wouldn't touch this. Of course Fox would be afraid of this. Of course Obama probably lied. So the culture, in terms of understanding Obama's deceptiveness, moved a long way.
You know, at the beginning, when you were talking earlier, the last section of the show, about how when Obama did find out that Frank Marshall, that his father was not the goat herder, but Frank Marshall Davis, and freaked out. To put it in perspective, though, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, an interracial marriage like that was a big-time no-no. I mean, and you tried to hide that. And then, you know, I actually felt sorry for him for about a brief second when you were talking about that, Joel, that to have, you know, in your teens, in your formidable years, to be told that a certain person's not your father, but this person is. I mean, that's got to be tough to take. But in the meantime, to sit there and want to fashion yourself after someone like Malcolm X, who tried to assimilate after a while, and I believe firmly was killed for that. Malcolm X did say, if you're a political chump if you throw all your weight behind one political party that controls the government. And that is, I don't know, it's a kind of a tangled
one
web
political
in some
party that
respect.
does nothing for you.
Does nothing for you. And what is going to make the black community wake up to that?
Well, look, a lot of them were waking up. You'll see in my interviews, and There's No Place Like Utopia, some of the biggest conservatives are black women. They don't want illegals taking their jobs. They don't want their kids smoking legalized marijuana. They don't want any of this nonsense. And I thought people were coming around. Once Obama got out of the picture, you can see that there was not that much enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton's policies because they didn't help the black community at all. And by the way, don't feel sorry for Obama. Frank Marshall Davis was his father growing up from 12 years old. I mean, he spent a lot of time with him. He also had 4 fathers. He had Frank was his father. He had Lolo Soetoro, which was his stepfather, who stayed in touch and moved to Hawaii even after that. His grandfather was another father, took care of him. And, of course, he had the distant Kenyan father. So he was well fathered. It's just that he went in the direction of this, communist father, had all the influence and radicalized him. So I don't, have too much sympathy for all the deception that he then brought on the country.
Well, the bottom line is this, and you just said this. It's kind of irrelevant who his biological father is. What's critically important is who influenced him.
Mm-hmm. Right. And if he had come out and said, my father's a goat herder from Kenya, I'm going to bring us all together, that was the public narrative. If he had told the truth and said, my father was a Soviet agent who radicalized me to dislike, hate white people, and want to bring down the free market system and replace it with socialism, that wouldn't have worked.
We got so much I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but then when you talk about a situation, I think Trump should actually say, as when the media says, show your tax returns, Trump should just say, okay, when Obama shows his college transcripts, his U.S. history, his DNA.
Remember, he offered him $5 million a couple years back to show his college transcripts, which would have been very problematic. My research shows that Obama claimed to have transferred from Occidental College after 2 years and have the last 2 years at Columbia. All my research shows that he did a junior year abroad in Pakistan in his junior year, and then got a Ford Foundation scholarship and attended Columbia only during his senior year. And the reason nobody saw him in class at all for the 2 years, of course he wasn't there for the junior year. The reason nobody saw him or met him in the political science department that he claimed to be attending was because he was only taking freshman classes that senior year in order to fill out the requirements, and that's how he ended Columbia.
All right, let's move to this this more recent film that you've done. There's No Place Like Utopia.
Okay.
First of all, if I can play, what's the guy, Roger Ebert? What's the guy, the film critic guy, Donna?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Entertaining, informative, humorous at times, eye-opening. Those are the kind of words that I would use to describe what's going on. And also validating, in which if you are a conservative, if you are a student of history, if you are on top of current events, and if you have been mocked for the past 8 years, you watch this film and it validates what you've been thinking. Now, that's one guy's opinion of this film. But
good opinion.
Donald Ebert.
Yeah, Don Ebert. But
I like that critic.
But having said that, you're right. When you would go into some of these communities, Detroit, Newark, or as they say up there, Newark, Chicago, and you're speaking with the citizens of those communities, it was very clear and very obvious that the cornerstone, the strength of the black family, because many of those that you interviewed were black, was mama. And that is something that when you said earlier that the mother, the elder female in a black family is often the more conservative, valued individual, I totally agree. I also would take it one step further to say, and I've had this conversation probably 200 times with black individuals in the past 8 years, and that is, as a white conservative, I would guarantee that the values socially that I have align more with you as a black American that has voted for Barack Obama now twice, and Democrat Party candidates probably your entire life, than I would any other liberal. And quite frankly, many whites that vote Republican or conservative. The black family roots, as you know, are entrenched in conservative values. And that has always been, well, not always, for the past 8 years, has been my argument toward black Americans as to the question, why the hell are you voting for the Democrat Party?
Well, as we said earlier, it's simply based on the emotional idea that someone of the same background, African American, could be elected to high office and what that means for them. That's it, and that's how they were manipulated by the radical left, and that's how that was Obama's intent for 20 years. And those are the people that backed him. Don't forget, in Chicago, black people didn't support Obama. It was the white liberals. That was his base, the white liberals.
Right.
He was elected only first to state senate because he eliminated the competition through having her disqualified, Alice Palmer. He got elected to Senate because David Axelrod, both parents, Communist Party members. He helped Obama eliminate the competition by revealing some issues of the guy's divorce.
Yeah,
so
and that
Obama
was illegal. They were sealed documents that somehow got unsealed.
Yeah, Obama did not get out of Chicago or Illinois with any black support. It was all white liberals. It was only this narrative my father's from Kenya. I'm going to bring us all together. That galvanized white people and the black people as well to think that he would fulfill these mainstream goals that he laid out. But it was all a fraud. It's a complete fraud, what he would do and who he is. And when you put him in the White House, you have Barack Obama, his father's former Soviet agent, Communist Party member, David Axelrod, both parents Communist Party members, Valerie Jarrett, her father-in-law and mother, both Communist Party people. What you saw was essentially a soft coup where Communist Party diaper babies took over the White House. And it's no surprise what we got was this radical left agenda that destroyed the economy and destroyed America's standing in the world.
I believe it's still happening right now, that soft coup. I think it's amazing how the narrative changes with the mainstream media. The Russian thing didn't stick, so then you move on to the next thing and the next thing, and then we're all up in arms about what Trump said about Charlottesville. And now you even have people like Dianne Feinstein saying, well, their Antifa is possibly a little bit on the violent side. And that brings me to my next question, Joel Gilbert. Even back then, when you were looking into Dreams from My Real Father and Frank Marshall Davis and the communist narrative back then, it's the same narrative now. If you are on the right, if you oppose them, if you oppose socialism, you're a KKK, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, especially if you were a nationalist, which I believe is us deplorables that might have voted for a Ted Cruz or a Donald Trump. And now the Southern Poverty Law Center is, through this whole thing of closing or taking down these statues, is saying even military bases are racist. And all the military bases need to be closed, which is exactly what they tried to do in Hawaii, correct? Years ago?
Yeah. Well, let me comment. The socialism and Islamism have a lot in common. They both view Western free speech, free market system, constitutional governments as an obstacle to taking power, and therefore the number one target on the path to salvation. For Islamists, the path to salvation is controlling governments and achieving paradise in the next world. For Marxists and leftists, paradise is utopia on earth, paradise on earth, with government controlling everyone and everything and achieving this fantasy of this paradise. On the path to paradise, Islamists and the Taliban and the ISIS, they destroy monuments, they destroy past civilizations, they destroy churches, they destroy statues of any civilization that ever existed on earth because they want to show their superiority of their ideas and why, and they want to disconnect the people from their connection to their own history and their own identity. If you're a Christian and Yazidi living in Iraq, they'll destroy your church and all your monuments so that you have no connection to the land or to your history, therefore making you more susceptible to joining their movement and legitimizing their movement. So too do leftists and Marxists want to destroy monuments. ISIS and the Democrat Party would love to knock down Mount Rushmore for different reasons. The leftists because Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. The ISIS because it represents Western power and superiority and success. But the goal is the same, to disconnect the indigenous people from their roots and from their history, to recreate the world, as Obama said, to create the world, to remake the world as it should be, under this government-controlled paradise that we know from history. It's been tried over and over. Progressives and leftists murdered 150 million of their own people during peacetime in Maoist China, Stalin, Cambodia, all over the world. They had to throw people into gulags and mass murder their own people because they wouldn't conform to live in this socialist paradise. And that's why they destroy monuments, because they want to disconnect the people from their history, their past, just as the Taliban and ISIS would do.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Joel Gilbert. You can find him by going to his website, joelgilbert.net. Also, Highway 61 Entertainment. And, Joel, I went to the website last week, and ladies and gentlemen, you were able to find numerous films and documentaries that are Fascinating, informative, well-researched, and exceptionally well-produced. Big hat tip to you, Joel. I appreciate your courage. And I believe that Donna's got here in my notes, take any risk to expose the truth because the U.S. is worth it.
Yeah, America's worth it. You got guts, Joel. I wish I had as much guts as you.
All right,
because what you've said is really, really so true and just needs to get out there.
We got about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to hit you with 2 questions so that I don't take time asking 2 separate questions.
I want to get to Paul McCartney is really dead.
We will.
Okay.
Joel, who do you feel is more dangerous?
You can have me back. You can have me back if you got more questions. Go ahead.
No, maybe what we ought to do is just add another segment. But
there you
go. Joel, who do you feel is more dangerous, both then being, for the past 8 to 20 years, and now, Barack or Michelle? Second question, and I think I know the answer. I do know the answer to this, but name a liberal or Democrat or progressive-run city that has ever been prosperous, and when has the last time in history liberal or progressive politics and economics, when have they ever been successful? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to chew on those.
Okay. Well, look, Barack Obama still, I think, has charisma and a following and a voice that the media will allow to be heard. And he's still practicing this stealth socialism, stealth Marxism, where he's trying to manipulate and organize and push people's buttons, and he's dishonest about what he's really trying to do. So now Michelle Obama, if you saw my film, and also there was a recent book by David Garrow where he interviewed a couple of Obama's girlfriends from way back, and it told the real story of why Obama married Michelle, which I alluded to in my film.
Yep.
Obama had a girlfriend who was half Japanese, half white American, and he told her at some point after a year or two of dating, and they were talking about getting married, Obama told her, and she wrote this in her diary, Obama told her, I can't marry you because I'm not black enough. People in Chicago don't think I'm black, and I have to marry a black woman for my political career. And she told him, she said, that's crazy. That's why you marry somebody. It's for love. It's for so many other things. And they would have these big fights over it, and eventually Obama left her. And Michelle gave him instant street cred. Here's a black woman from Southside Chicago whose family, and she actually grew up in Jesse Jackson's household. She was very close to Jesse's daughter, Santita. Her father was a Democratic Party operative. So Obama needed Michelle as a supporting actress for a street cred to give him some street cred. Imagine if he'd married a white woman or a half Japanese woman. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have fit this narrative, I'm this black street kid, So that, I don't see Michelle as dangerous or anything like that. I just see her as filling that role to legitimize Obama as a black man, even though he had no black experience, suffered no racism, knew nothing, had no black friends growing up, didn't identify as black, Barry. Okay. So that's in terms of progressive cities, look, they're all failures. They're all urban America has been decimated by these liberal policies. In my film, There's No Place Like Utopia, I go to Detroit and talk to all those people. They explain how these liberal policies drove out all the businesses. Once the businesses left, there were no more taxes to collect. There's no more police. There's no more firemen. The whole thing just falls apart. So that's an easy one. Progressivism doesn't work. It's never worked. And the tragedy is that it's still being pushed in the greatest entrepreneurial, individualistic, free market society that ever existed in the history of the world in America. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing and frightening to see Bernie Sanders with thousands of people coming to these rallies, and he's screaming, we're going to break up the banks, we're going to break up the pharmaceutical companies, we're going to destroy business. This is the Marxist communist ideal. We're going to destroy the entrepreneurs. They used to call them the bourgeois. We're going to throw them in jail. We're going to take away their businesses and give it to the government. And everyone's going to get a piece of everything. It's all going to work out great. And people are sitting there clapping for this guy. I think they have no idea what he's talking about. But that's the naivete of the public. You can elect someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, or 10,000 votes this way or that way would have been Hillary Clinton. Executive order after executive order, opening the borders, canceling amendment after amendment from the Constitution. I mean, America was on the brink. Maybe we still are. If Hillary Clinton had won, there'd be nothing left of the United States in 4 years.
I think when the trust fund money runs out, maybe they'll wake up. But Joel Gilbert, you're a huge Bob Dylan fan. I can honestly say it doesn't take a
weatherman to know which way the wind blows.
I was just going to say weatherman to know which way the wind blows. But I'm a huge Beatle fan. Now you got 30 seconds left. Why is Paul McCartney really dead?
Well, Paul McCartney Really Is Dead is an urban legend from the 60s that's a lot of fun. I made a film out of it called Paul McCartney Really Is Dead. My distributor asked me to do another one on a rock and roll legend, and I made another mockumentary called Elvis Found Alive, which Obama is actually weaved into quite a bit. You got to see that one. And they're both a lot of fun, and they're two great icons of pop culture, and certainly Elvis Presley was such a great American patriot. You can really look at his words and his work and understand him as a great American hero.
Yep. Turn me on, dead man.
There are a number of ways to find your work and to find what you're doing. Give us one. Would the best be the joelgilbert.net?
Or highway61ent.com. Highway61ent.com is all the films. Most of them are on Amazon. Some are on Netflix. It's really easy to find them, and I hope everyone will check them out.
Joel Gilbert, thank you so much for joining us again. Highway61ent.com, joelgilbert.net. Look them up, folks. And again, to say, take any risk to expose the truth because America is worth it means you got my major vote, Joel Gilbert. Keep up the good work, and it's just been wonderful to talk to you. And we always close with the saying, in light of Hurricane Harvey, I don't know how to pronounce this, Jean-Paul Sartre? Anyhow.
Sounded good to me.
The only guy who isn't rowing has time to rock the boat. To me, that is the media in light of their criticism of the folks down there working around Hurricane Harvey. God bless Texas, folks. God bless America. Find us at cowboylogic.us. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, everyone.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance, yes. When cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance, yes. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.